And he got stuck hanging out with me in West, so there was no shortage of ribbing and shaming for a few days there. But Will, you're on mute, so you can't even defend yourself. But for those of you who haven't met the infamous, which is not the same as famous, Dustin Bolander, Dustin works with Will as part of Fifth Wall Cyber Insurance. Will, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I was actually looking to capture your background and put it on my green screen so people would confuse us, but
Right.
didn't get time to do it. Didn't have time.
They're all jealous of the hair. Don't let them kid you.
I'm matching black shirts.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, it's not quite, but yeah, nice.
Yeah, I just have my Fin shirt on backwards. That's all.
Okay.
No, but yeah, my name's Will. I'm from Fifth Wall Solutions. You know, we are a cyber insurance wholesaler. So we devote 100% of our time to understanding cyber insurance, educating MSPs on cyber insurance, helping them secure for their clients, because it's a constantly changing thing. So we believe very strongly in the importance of the knowledge behind the industry and making sure that we're kind of staying one step ahead of the game, which again, it's 2 years behind, so it's not too hard to do.
Right. So there was somebody put a post out this morning, and I think it was your post this morning.
It was my post
talking about cyber insurance and whether or not it's even going to be a thing. Right? You want to start and kind of tell that story a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we did this boot camp last week in Chicago, and one of the questions that actually came up was, "Hey, we heard back in December that there was speculation that the cyber insurance is going to implode, and industry is going to implode on itself because it's not sustainable. They're losing way too much money. The cost of coverage versus the amount insurance companies are paying out is just not going to be worth it. So carriers are going to back out." And that was just some sort of speculation that came out back in December, and now articles are coming out saying this might have been a little preemptive. A little too much speculation there. So. And we always have seen that. It's we're on new territory when it comes to cyber insurance in the insurance industry, because most insurance is built upon years of consistent data, and they're trying to build data on something that's rapidly changing. So It is going to look different, and they're going to have to adapt, and they are. So I think we're going to
have some good conversations around that, right? What adaptation looks like.
Yep.
There's a lot of the correlation to the little box you plug in your car that gets you the safe driver discount, right?
Yeah.
And what a lot of folks are expecting is the IT version of that, right? Some sort of a scanner that lives on the network that scans forever and alerts you and maybe your insurance company when MFA gets disabled for a user and comes to you and says, "Hey, you got 3 days to turn MFA back on for Bob, or you're not going to be insurable."
Exactly.
There's a lot of potential for technologies like that. And I think, we don't want anybody to be surprised when that thing pops up for the first time, or when these kind of conversations start to happen, or when an insurance company comes to you and says, "Oh, sorry, Bob." It was another Bob. The guy, you spelled it backwards. The other one. So, we don't want you guys to be surprised when this comes up for the first time, but I think the day is coming, and we've already heard that there are some folks who are doing external vulnerability scans. And I think there's going to be a lot more requirements for you guys to do something technical to attest to the state of an environment before we can get insurance.
Yeah.
So I talked through a lot of this on Tuesday with the 7-figure MSP crowd. I'd like to kind of take your stance on it, because I'm sure you can present these slides a little bit better than I can, because I just stood next to smart people last week and tried to replicate them this week, which is
yeah, that's what I did too.
All the pressure on Wes will make him.
Yeah, it's all
and he was too busy to be here. So
of course, no. So I think this is pretty straightforward here. So in 2015. When cyber insurance started, I mean, it's been on the scene longer than that, but that's really when it started to be taken seriously. It was cheap. I mean, you could get it. You could get $1 million policy for cyber insurance for less than $1,000. All you needed was revenue numbers and a website. And if you had a website, you were considered an insurable risk. Now, looking at that today, it's like, oh my goodness, that sounds like a ridiculous amount of, you just look at that, that doesn't make sense.
That's a threshold we can mostly pass.
Yeah, way past.
Yeah.
Then 2019, 2020 pandemic happens. You did have a few claims, but people then started going remote. And when they went remote and work from home happened and nobody had MFA enabled, the endpoints were not being really protected or covered for more than maybe business hours. There's really loose security. Ransomware attacks and general breaches just rose dramatically, and carriers lost a ton of money. So that was largely due to the pandemic. And carriers realized all of a sudden that, oh, maybe we should change our underwriting guidelines a little bit. So we're gonna get a little more serious with this. So that's probably where most of you started to see the shift, is between 2019 and 2020. Cyber insurance applications got a lot more complicated. So you started seeing questions about security controls. And I think to make things even worse, those security control questions were pretty vague and kind of not helpful. Like, it just said, do you have MFA? And as a professional, you're like, well, where? Right. But the carriers didn't know what that was. They're just like, do you have it? So that's where it started. But, you know, as time's gone on, we have seen incidents start to go down. If you look at that last slide, it says largely due to the conflict in Ukraine. That's partially because, well, I think people are a little more focused on other things in the Ukraine right now. So you're not seeing as many breaches or breach attempts or attacks coming out of there. But
that's actually referenced right here. Like, we're looking at the direct loss ratios, and you can see the loss ratios were just skyrocketing, and then Ukraine happened, and this is kind of tailed off. This was a really interesting slide that we talked through at the event. Notice the increase in premiums, and the average is about 25% increase per quarter, not per year, but per quarter. So, I mean, the price is just ridiculous. It's unsustainable. They can't continue to increase prices at this rate, but they can't continue to lose money at this rate either. So, do you anything else that you think?
Which that's a great point. That's what that's what created all that speculation of how is this industry going to remain. And part of that article I shared this morning was talking about just I liked the phrase cyber hygiene. You know, it makes me think like, hey, your hygiene stinks. Like, reality, it's like, if you're not taking care of yourself to protect yourself on, you know, both the left and right of boom, just to being able to protect yourself and have a good incident response plan and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, but the carriers aren't going to consider you anymore. That's just the reality, because they're like, we can't keep raising premiums or no one's going to buy the policy, and we can't keep taking the hits we're going to take. So the real thing we can do is keep up with what's going on in the industry and make sure that we're requiring the right controls.
I'm going to see if I can pop this out. I'm afraid that it's going to go full screen, and on a 49-inch monitor, it's going to look terrible for everyone. But let's see what it does. Yeah, maybe that's visible to you guys. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that not terrible? Okay.
No, it looks great.
Just littler, but it's fine.
Yeah. Oh, is that small? Actually smaller and harder to look at?
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably bad then.
But I'm also on a large monitor, so I didn't notice the difference.
So I will try and make it, but I did drag and drop the slide deck into the chat, so you can actually download these slides in the chat if you're over there. So don't hesitate to grab these, steal them. There's actually a few slides in here you can put in front of your customers or start to have conversations in front of your customers with. So don't hesitate to make these yours.
These early slides are a lot about history and whatnot, but
yep. And Bob's telling us he's got one client that won't update a line of business application, so he's uninsurable. Not surprising. And that's a tough choice. And you guys at some point are going to have to make the choice, and you might have to have a talk with your insurance company. Is it someone who you can still deal with if they won't take cyber insurance? Because, you know, they're going to come back and try and sue your insurance company later on. Ours went from $2,500 for $1 million to $7,000 for the same coverage. Went through TechRug, was able to get $2 million for the $7,000. Yeah, TechRug's fantastic. If you don't already know them, Will and team, you know Justin and the team at TechRug probably pretty well. Do you want to explain how you guys kind of fit in all of this? Because you've got TechRug, who is an actual agency, right? Are they an agency?
TechRug is they're an MGA, so they have their own. They're called an MGA, managing agency. So they have their own insurance product they've created, and it's geared around MSPs. So like, if you're an MSP and you're looking for coverage, you should have tech E&O coverage. Most carriers. So you look at this slide in front of us, right? And there's that Oprah slide. If you want to put that up for a second, that's a good slide. So Oprah, right? You get insurance, everybody gets insurance. That used to be the case with MSPs too. And it was super easy to get a tech E&O policy. And then carriers realized, oh, I don't know what I don't know what the difference is between a computer and the internet. So I'm afraid of MSPs. So they ran away. TechRug said, rather than run away, we're going to build our entire business around MSPs. So even though they have extremely strict underwriting guidelines, if you meet those requirements, they're gonna place you with really good coverage, and it's going to be the best coverage you can get. And as expensive as it is, it's going to be probably the most competitive rate you're going to find out there right now. Just because they built for your channel. Most carriers are like, all right, we'll take on your risk, but we're going to charge you $10K for $1 million policy, whatever. So that's TechRug. Fifth Wall partners, just see selfish plug. We partner with MSPs because we want to help you, enable you to sell more of your cybersecurity controls in order to make your clients cyber insurance compliant, if that's a word. It's not really a thing, but prepare them to be considered eligible for a cyber insurance policy, which then we can get for them. And because we're a wholesaler, we can get much cheaper rates.
Yep.
Because we can go to all these companies. That's
you guys work with 35-ish carriers, something
42.
Like 42. Okay.
Yeah, the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah.
It's where we ride. So but yeah, so that's what's been going on in the cyber insurance market is it's just a mess. I mean, carriers lost a ton of money and they're playing catch up now, which is partially why you're seeing these skyrocketing premiums. But I did a live stream yesterday on LinkedIn. There's some reports coming out that they're actually seeing premiums level off this year. So there are a decent number of clients who didn't see an increase. So that's big.
That's surprising. Yeah, that's new and different.
That's very new and different. So there are things coming out.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about all the data collection that's happening and kind of the things that are going on? Because I'll be honest, one of the things I didn't realize when I used to fill out these forms was that some of the questions aren't really questions that are designed to decide whether or not you actually get insurance, right?
Yeah.
When you're filling out this 50-page or 50-question questionnaire, it's actually a smaller number of those questions that matter. You want to talk about the data and how they're using it and what they're collecting and why?
Yeah, I mean, that is how the insurance industry works. So they have these actuaries who are collecting data, and they're watching, and they're looking at past losses and past risks and kind of analyzing all those pieces. And they're saying, okay, we had a huge number of losses in this group with this industry, and all the people who had losses were missing these controls. But all the people who didn't have losses had those controls. So over time, they say something like, actually, we're going to start requiring this control for this industry or things like that, right? So that's how you start to see the added controls. But the only way they collect that information is if they know the entire security posture of your client. The problem is most of those
they have to either collect it when you apply or when you've had a breach.
Exactly. Right. And it's usually when you apply. But again, that's on good faith. And that's part of the challenge here too, is that if you have clients, and this is more for MSPs listening in, if you have clients who are just checking boxes on those apps and they're not bringing them to you to actually certify it, they're just wasting money. They're just getting a policy that's going to be like $6,000 and it's not going to pay anything because their claim's going to get denied when forensics comes in. Yeah. So that's just, I don't understand that business choice either. So
I don't think people understand what happens after a breach, right? And we have that slide here. We'll talk about that, but I don't think your end customer understands that they're going to come back in and want to do forensics to decide what happens and how to deal with it after a breach occurs.
Yeah, and you're going to be facing a lot of pressure as an MSP if your client has a breach, because they're going to say, look, I just want to get me back online. I just want to be back online. Like, that's it. It's how fast can you get me back up and running? That's all I care about. And to be fair, they want to work, right? They want to be able to keep their business going. But there are a lot of other layers of what happens in the event of a breach that has nothing to do with their interrupted business activity. And that those things need to happen before you can get them back online. So this is the slide here, right? So when that breach happens, I mean, I always like to say in that first part, breach occurs, the first thing you need to do is get the insurance company on the phone. Because as annoying as that sounds, because you're an MSP, you're like, I can do this. I can get this back up online. We're good to go. All the legal ripple effects that can happen. So, any sort of lawsuits, class action lawsuits, any credit monitoring, notification, anything that requires that breaches and branches outside of the organization that you're restoring from a backup, they need to know just how far reaching this was. So sometimes you call the insurance company, they say, all right, it doesn't sound like that bad, just restore from backups. Great, you can do that, boom, done. But if they're like, hey, this sounds like a serious breach, we need to get forensics in here, they're going to bring forensics in to do all of this stuff. And if you restored it from a backup and made it so forensics can't get in to see what happened, we're in trouble, right? Because now they'll say, well, we're not covering this claim because we can't research it.
And even something as simple as we powered off all the machines because we panicked.
Right.
Erases data that was in memory and things that forensics can recover, right? These are the things we don't think about.
Yeah. Usually they say, any sort of isolation is okay. Like if you can isolate the incident, do something to isolate it without deleting data. If you can isolate it so it doesn't reach any further than it already has, awesome. That's great. Like if that just means,
pulling out the cables, like that was the conversation we had when we were in Chicago.
But for the most part, you want to avoid restoring from backups because, and I get this question a lot with MSPs. They're like, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do in the event of a breach? And I always just say, look, call the carrier first. And as an MSP, you really should have a copy of your client's policy in Lifecycle Insights because you're using it. So put it there. Have it, know the expiration date, but also know the contact number if there's a breach. Call them and say like, look, I'm here with Mr. and Mrs. Client. We had a breach, or we think we did. I'm noticing these things on the network. We want to put you on notice. Is this claim worthy? They'll tell you what to do. And that can be frustrating because a lot of times I'm sure you know more than the insurance companies do. But at the same time, going through this process will make sure that your client, you want to make sure that your client is not on the hook for all this money they might have lost because something you did to try and protect them in the first place, because then they're just mad at you.
Yeah, and I think language matters. Be careful with the word breach. To William's point, like let the insurance provider decide what it is or isn't. Let the lawyers decide what it is or isn't. We have a potential incident is probably the best language you can use because it is industry specific language. It has a real definition. We will, in these conversations, we talk about breach just because it's a thing that that we really do worry about. But when you're speaking with the insurance company and with your client, and especially with the public before or after the fact, words matter. And
100%. And I mean, like
in our IR, he has an incident response.
Yay. Will Pote, good guy. Also, with all that, I think it's really important, like every policy defines cyber incident differently. So I like the idea of using potential incident. It's just good because that's mostly just like, hey, we may be putting you on alert, or this may be something more. We're not sure, you decide.
So talk
Keeps
about
the
that.
liability off.
And we'll
Brian
grab
has a
Brian's
question.
Yeah, we'll grab Brian's question in just a second, but I'll stay on that. Putting an insurance company on notice. Let's delve into that really quickly and just talk about what that is and what it does or doesn't mean to the MSP or to the customer.
Sure. So putting the insurance company on notice is this idea. I mean, to Will's point before, we have a potential incident. We picked up something where there was an alert on an endpoint or something, right? So we picked this up. We're putting you on notice. So we're making you aware that this could be something. Let them tell you what they think the next course of action should be. If that means, hey, file a claim, or thanks for putting us on notice. They'll
keep
probably
us alerted if anything changes. I mean, those are the exact words that I've heard from my insurance company.
Yeah, alert us if anything changes. And also you can ask the question, I think, at that point of like, can I do anything, can I do anything to stop this? Here's some of the things that I would recommend doing as the MSP to fix this. Is that okay?
Yeah, I had TechRug as my insurance provider, and at one point I had to put them on notice because we had a workstation get compromised. We put them on notice, and they said as long as it appears to be stuck on one workstation, like we gave them what our plan was, and they said as long as you don't see any evidence of anything beyond one workstation, restore the workstation and move along. But we literally read them the game plan and said, hey, this is what we think we ought to do, but we can't be 1,000% sure that the rest of the network is isolated. We believe it is, but when we think we have an isolated breach. So anyway, but putting an insurance company on notice, the important part that I learned through TechRug was that it doesn't raise your premium. It doesn't cost you more money. There is no downside to it and all upside, I guess, is the point.
Sometimes you have people who want to sweep things under the rug, right? It's like, oh, I don't want the thought of something getting out. But if something did get out, And now all these people have to be on alert. It's better for the insurance company to know earlier that this could have turned into something. Sometimes, and this doesn't happen all the time or often, but I've seen it happen where the insurance carrier will actually either lower or remove the deductible if a claim does arise from it, if you put them on notice. So,
Which is insane to me. Like,
yeah,
insurance companies aren't known for giving away money.
no, but I think just the insanity of an incident could cause is,
Yeah.
a pretty big deal. So,
Yeah. Brian, you had a question.
Yeah, this is something that's on my list to knock out. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, right? Because we're touching on a subject right now that I don't know that insurance companies are communicating to clients or MSPs properly on how they should be addressing things, right? So if my client signs up for cybersecurity insurance, why aren't they given a form that says, hand this to your MSP in the event of an incident, and these are the steps we want them to follow to make sure they're not going to cause your claim to fall apart on you, right? And so I'm trying to understand that better from an MSP standpoint. We don't do incident response,
but I think we're back to the point of insurance companies are failing. They don't know how to respond to this. They don't know how to handle this, and so they're not telling you what to do because they don't know how to do incident response either, right? And Will, you can talk to that, but I think the answer is
that's fair. Maybe it's more conversation, right?
Yeah, no, and I think the answer is you're spot on. They're failing you. They should be doing that. In absence of them doing it, I think it's one of those things you have to pick up and take responsibility for and say, Mr. Customer, here's a worksheet that we've built, and this is a benefit of working with us, that we'll work with you and your carrier to fill in all the blanks and figure out how we respond when something happens. I think that's a great point.
Well, and I'm wondering if rather than wait for the insurance companies to do that or go to each individual insurance company to figure out what their requirements are, I'm wondering if we don't just come up with our own incident response plan that we give to the client and tell them to give to their insurance company to vet that this is an okay IR plan. I mean, there's different IR plans for different events, so that's hard, right? It's like, well, what type of IR event are we dealing with?
And they're probably not going to vet it for you.
Because they don't want to take on that liability, right?
well,
Am I
also
right
I think
there,
a
Will?
part of it is they don't know what some of the stuff you're going to put in there is. Like, I know that sounds terrible, but if you think of an insurance company, they're like giant calculators. They say, what is a risk? Here are all the different things that define the risk. How much money can I charge in order to make more than I'm paying out on the risk? They're not cybersecurity experts working at the insurance company. When there's an incident, they're going to contract out, and they have people they've contracted out with to pay and come do these things, like their forensics teams and stuff like that. Like, those forensics people don't work for the insurance companies, at least in most cases. Even in some insurance companies, you're starting to see partnering with some MSPs to say, look, if you don't have these controls we require, we have someone you can go to get those. They're not offering them
we'll get into those
themselves.
controls in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
William, you got a question?
Well, sort of, and more just, so we're rolling out Sophos MTR complete to everyone, or MDR complete, which effectively like comes with the Sophos incident response team. And I'm wondering, so like they will jump in and start remediating on our behalf. And I'm wondering how much of that could potentially be an issue. Because if they catch an incident and stop it, like, I don't want to go over, like, that's good. We want to limit the exposure, but at the same time, does that potentially pose a problem with the insurance? Or because they have such good logging in place, does that, I don't know, I'm just sorry, it was just something that kind of randomly jumped into my head. And as we were talking about incident response,
I have thoughts, but I'll let Will touch it first if he wants to.
No, I think you should. That's actually a great question. I'm actually thinking in my head, I'm going to go explore that later.
My thought is you want to ask Sophos a question, which is, how far will they go? Because typically on EDR, MTR, whatever alphabet soup they want to have, typically they stop at isolation. And they know better than to reboot things and do things that would destroy evidence. And you're probably in a better place that you have. And that's one of the things that's being required is 24/7 monitored endpoint detection and response, which is what the Sophos product is. But the other thing, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, you can go to the insurance company and say, hey, these are the folks who are doing some incident response for us. Are they approved or not? right?
Got
'Cause
it.
insurance companies have some kind of a list. Am I making that up, Will?
Uh, no, you're not making it up, but the approved vendors don't necessarily mean that the ones you're using are not
Yeah.
going to be okay. You know, like that's important too, is like you don't need to succumb to the approved vendors of the insurance companies. There's only like there was a list of 10. We've talked to them and they've added some to their list because we told them about them. We've added them, you know, we explained to them what they do. But I think your question is actually one I don't want to give an answer on that just yet. I'm going to look it up and I'll email you about it because
You
that's
tell he's
actually
the insurance guy. He doesn't want to say the wrong thing.
yeah,
No, and that's
no.
fair. And well, and honestly, I hadn't really like I've been kind of thinking about it because they're like, oh yeah, we jump in and remediate in like under 2 minutes on average, or whatever their stuff is.
Yep.
And that's good. And like the goal again is to minimize exposure. But I hadn't really thought about it from okay, so they fix the problem, or maybe they go fully into remediation and limit it. Like what is that going to cause a problem for potentially on the insurance side?
My guess is that they know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do.
I'd like to think so.
and where to stop.
I'd like
Right,
to
we'd
think
like to
so.
think so, but I think you should
But-
confirm that with them. I would say
Yeah.
that I would reach out to them and just say, do you have some documentation on what response looks like, right? What does the R in this product name really look like? And where do you stop? Because I have concerns of not preserving evidence for the insurance company.
So there's
Yeah,
two
yeah.
things. Brian said stopping the bleeding is that's the key, right? If you can stop the bleeding, that's where you want to really
Isolate.
focus your efforts. But then Matthias said something important too. Remediation prior to damage shouldn't require insurance. And that the one challenge there is it's like, hey, I want to cut off I want to cut off the issue where it started. It's what we talked about before. Hey, put the insurance carrier on notice. So to that point, remediation, no damage has been done. Hey, I stopped the threat before it could spread, but I'm going to call the insurance company anyway and put them on notice because this could turn into something.
Well, and
That's really
if
important.
if you think you've remediated it before it spread, right? Maybe nothing actually got encrypted, or maybe just one workstation got encrypted, but then you had data exfiltration. You could have a problem you don't realize, and that's the
We're
other
going
big
from
issue.
ransom to extortion.
And
Exactly.
right. And
Well,
now
but-
if you've had the insurance company on notice, guess what? You're ahead of the game because you called it in early, you told them what you were supposed to tell them. And this is where even just a business email compromise, when somebody loses their mailbox, that should be a reportable incident to the insurance company. Like, sounds like a painful extra step, but it's the world we live in. And Matthew's got a question. I want to let him jump in and talk. He's been super patient. So
Hey, Alex, thanks for taking my question. So I was talking to a client that I said, hey, are you getting cyber insurance? And they said, yeah, we are. And they said, our carriers, I said, oh, do you need help to do an assessment? He says, oh, the carrier is going to do an assessment on us. So I wanted your take, is that typical now? And how do you see that different from what, because our assessment is going to be very different when we look at things versus what the carrier looks at.
To my knowledge, carrier assessments are just external scans right now, which really aren't the best.
they're usually accompanied with a questionnaire, right?
Well, the questionnaire is the questionnaire is a good faith questionnaire, right? So like if your client fills this out, Matthew, and they just did it themselves, and then they sent it to the insurance company, and then the insurance company does their external scan and sees, hey, everything's good, then they'll probably get a policy. But if they filled out that form on their own and they filled things out incorrectly and there's a breach, they could risk not being covered.
Yeah.
I'm
sounds
not
like Brian's
familiar with
seen-
like
Sounds
them.
like Brian's seeing the cowbell agent being installed, and somebody at the event said something about one of the vendors having some sort of an agent. I think this is where it's all going.
I think
right?
so.
And so I think we have to, as MSPs, wrestle to the ground the concept of, hey, there's going to be somebody installing agents on my network that I'm probably not real happy about and comfortable with, and we're going to have to find a way to be comfortable with them, but also a way to isolate them and manage them, because God only knows what comes to you through that agent.
So just
God
to
forbid.
follow up, how do you work with them in this situation? So help the client understand, at the same time provide some, like if they're just doing, for example, external scan for kind of, oh, you have these DNS records or whatever that's not properly set up. and we're doing more of an internal scan of, hey, do you have, encryption, MFA turned up and all that? Is that something that you guys, how do you typically recommend us working with the carrier so that we're not like see at odds with each other? Say, my carrier is already doing a scan and assessment. Why do you want to do a scan?
Yeah, my answer is a selfish plug, so maybe Alex should answer
I'm
this instead.
okay with your answer because that was going to be my answer. Like, you should have someone in your corner, whether it's Fifth Wall or Tech Rug or whoever, who is on your side helping you be the expert. Because at this point, if you don't feel like you're comfortable having that conversation with a carrier, then you probably shouldn't. But you should have someone in your corner that is. And that's exactly what Fifth Wall does, is go partner with you to say, okay, look, I know you got your carrier here. Let's, number one, just, hey, if this doesn't pass the smell test, let me call somebody like Will and go, hey, this doesn't pass the smell test. What's going on here? I don't want to say to my client that this is out of character, but would you get on the phone with him and say this is out of character? And let the insurance people do the insurance talk. There's a lot of conversation around what you should and shouldn't say. And there's probably more that you shouldn't say than that you should say. I mean, my favorite limiter on this is that doesn't really pass the smell test. It's not what I'm hearing from other people. Can we get my expert in here to talk to you? Right. And you probably shouldn't say very much more than that. It's not your place to say you have enough coverage, you don't have enough coverage. Yes, this policy looks great. Those are things you should never say. They back you into a non-defensible position, to use the language that we use on this call all the freaking time anymore. And we want to make sure that you let an expert have the expert conversation, and you know full well what you're an expert in. Let's not get to a point where we're trying to be insurance experts. Even Dustin, who went out and became a licensed insurance agent, doesn't say some of this stuff. Like he drags the Fifth Wall team in to let the insurance guy be the expert on insurance.
Just to clarify, does that mean that we look at their policy and the Fifth Wall team's going to review their policy for them? Is that what this is? Is that what you're saying here?
That's exactly what I'm saying, right? So when you get a hold of a copy of this policy, and you should ask all of your clients for a copy of their policy, right? We've talked about this on previous calls. If you weren't here, here's the life cycle insights take on this. This is the bald guy on the internet, and the one that doesn't know anything about insurance, not the one that does. But this is my take on it. Get a policy from every single customer you have. If they won't give you the policy, at least get the renewal date. Okay. The renewal date tells you when you're going to start getting hit with questionnaires. I think you should get them 90 days out. Okay. The insurance company probably won't be ready to talk to you yet, but you'll be starting to get things together on your side. You'll reach out to their insurance company or have them reach out to their insurance company. Is there a new questionnaire? Are there new standards? What is the line that we're going to be held to? Right. I need to know, how tall do I have to be to ride this ride? And so what's the requirement going to be this year? These 5 seem to be the big ones. But we want to
that was 2022. We don't even know.
Okay.
It might change. I mean, I think we don't see it on here. I think privileged access, like admin stuff, PAM tools. I think you're gonna start seeing a lot more of that, because local admin rights are,
well, they should have been dead in 2002, but
but they're people like to be able to install what they want on their own devices, even though they're not their own devices.
So, but I think the point being, get ready early, build this into your budget, build this into your conversations with your customer, and that way you can get a hold of the policy early. And if something doesn't pass the smell test, it gives you plenty of time to go out and engage with somebody new. If you find out about this 14 days before renewal, and you have a list of 5 things that you have to go deploy on your client's network before they can get cyber insurance, and the policy looks funky and you don't like it, and you have to go bring in an insurance agent, everybody just can't move that fast, and your client's going to lapse on their insurance and get stuck. So we got to be out in front of this. It's got to be proactive. It's got to be one of those things where we're really looking at this down the road as a really high level conversation. And we'll touch on, Angela, I see your question there. We'll touch on each and every one of these and kind of talk about what they really mean. Will, did you have an opinion on that, or did I cover that okay?
I think that was great.
Okay.
I
said
do
it to
think
a lot of people, and if I was lying, I would have lied to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I do think that having someone in your corner, whoever it is, and some sort of cyber insurance partner is going to help things out, because in the traditional agency space, agents just don't have the time to commit to cyber insurance that's really necessary. Again, like, it's a rapidly changing industry. So, I mean, selfish plug for Fifth Wall. You talk to a client who's Matthew, who's being resistant on getting, an analysis done or whatever. Fifth Wall can come in absolutely free. You just tell them, hey, look, they'll come in and review your policy. They'll take a look at it, but they'll also talk to you about what the insurance companies are doing versus what you think they're doing. We want to erase some of those misconceptions for you. But that should just be something that whoever you're partnering with, they should be able to do, right? And that's important because
Yeah, so just Will, just to clarify, I mean, the clients have their own insurance broker that they said, hey, they usually go to the E&O insurance broker, says, we want to add cyber insurance. And they say, okay, sure, we're going to give you an add-on or rider or something. And they say, well, they didn't ask us for any assessment. They just said, it's just an add-on. And then
I
go,
had that slide up for a reason earlier.
can you go to the next one, actually, Alex? Thanks. Okay. So there's two types of cyber policies in the world, right? And this is exactly what you're talking about, Matthew. And this is really important. An add-on, it's called another name for it's an endorsement. You said rider. These are like, hey, I have a general liability policy, and the agent says, hey, do you want cyber? Yeah. All right, I'll check a box and add that too. And that's almost never. I've never seen it giving either full coverage or enough coverage, right? So it says here limits are at or below 100,000. I've seen them as low as $10,000. Like forensics will use that in 2 days.
Yeah.
Like it's just
Just gone.
hilarious. It's just they think they have coverage. So one of the questions I often ask a client is, well, do you remember having a conversation that lasted more than 5 minutes about cyber insurance? So that's often a good question to have, because if they didn't, it probably means they're missing a lot of coverage. You can go to that previous slide now, Alex. A good cyber insurance policy should be covering a lot of the threats that happen in the event of an incident, right? So a lot of times people are thinking about getting myself back up and online, but those are often things not covered on those little riders. The riders are usually just meant to be lawsuit protection. Again, it's added on to a general liability policy. But even then, the total amount that you're going to be covered for is like 100K or less on those riders. So it is important to understand that they're missing out on a lot of important coverages. A lot of times the e-theft, the electronic cybercrime stuff is missing from those riders. You don't have any first party stuff. So if their business is down, they're not getting, are they going to be able to, cover the loss of income that they're seeing? Are they going to keep paying their employees during the ransomware attack? Things like that. So a lot of that's missing. So that's oftentimes what a big part of that conversation with us is when we talk to clients is like, hey, show us your policy. Let's review it. We'll take a look at it for you.
Yep.
Because they are missing things.
So I do want to get into the 5 controls. We're not going to have time because we literally spent 2 full days in the classroom talking through this.
True.
But I want to get into the 5 controls just high level and let you guys pick them apart. If you think there's a ton of value in having this conversation on a future one of these, we can do that. But the 5 controls that they have out here include multi-factor authentication, specifically on remote access. And when the carriers are asking that question, we're seeing a couple of different variations of it. Do you have multi-factor authentication on all remotely accessible resources like VPN software? So not just your email, but the ADP payroll solution and all these other things.
Yeah, don't confuse remote access there with remote desktop. That's just part of it. Anything you can
remotely
access.
Accessible, anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So that's something that we need to think about, right? It's not just MFA now on VPN or on my Microsoft 365 tenant, but it's on every app that we remotely log into. So every web-based app. How many of you feel like you have a complete inventory of all of your customers' web applications? Right? Exactly. And for those of you we can't see, I'm sure there were a lot of eye rolls. That's the single reason that we've taken the time in the last 12 months to integrate with Sasleo and Augment, because those 2 tools give you that data, right? They help you take that inventory, put it in front of the client, and help the client really understand this requirement of insurance. So, if you've been struggling to get them to put the little MFA token thingy on the payroll solution or on something else, actually, we did see an issue where RDP was denied coverage even when properly configured. We had a conversation about that at the event. So RDP can be secured. It can be done right. And even done right, there's one insurance carrier out there who won't allow it.
Yep, they've added an exclusion for RDP based losses.
That's it. Yeah. So they'll give you insurance, but if RDP was involved, even if it had MFA and was secured and locked down, you're beat. Segregated backups. There's a couple requirements on this one, and that is that number one, that we have regular backups. Number two, that we have the correct access limits put on backups. So not everybody in your company and not everybody in the client's company gets access to backups, right? It only goes to the people on the team that need access to that. If you're a really small MSP, maybe everybody has access to that. But if you're a large MSP, not everybody's in there monkeying with the backups. It's a small and dedicated team. And then air gapping your backups. So does your provider give you a situation where they where they air gap, where they take a backup offline, and a bad actor who got access to your backup portal couldn't nuke all of your clients' backups? And that is a very important question to go ask to your backup providers. I know a lot of the big ones have it, but yeah, Ron, what's up, Ron? Oh, you're muted, or you're really far away. I can't tell.
Put your mic down, I think.
Oh, there we go.
Thanks, Marnie.
Yep.
So here's my question. When you talk about the whole backup thing, they've got to have a backup. I have a client that all of his business is done transactionally across a web app that they can have. He says there's no reason to have backups because all of everything we do is all in this app and it's all backed up, up in the cloud somewhere or some crazy crap like that. So we don't have to have that. Is that a true statement, or is that,
He's an idiot and probably uninsurable for that under that scenario.
Well, actually, he took him. We filled out the questionnaire for him, and the cyber insurance company came back and said, "Well, we can't insure you because you don't have backups." And he said, "Well, I've done business with all these years. Then I'm just going to cancel everything with you." And they came back and said, "Well, wait a minute now. Maybe you're right. You're backing up in the cloud. You're okay."
And this is why they lose money.
Yeah. So they may have bent on that transaction this year, but it's highly possible that they don't take the same tune to it.
Now that also, I mean, one of the things, immutable backups is the key here. So like, they don't just want you to be able to back stuff up. It needs to be like, you cannot edit it. It's mutable. Like no changing of the backups, no ways for, if there's a breach or an incident, for the criminal to get in and make any changes or, encrypt them or whatever. So it's like, you want to immutable, and cloud backups are fine, but I guess the system you're talking about is a little confusing to me, because it's like, it's not a true backup solution. So you're not one caveat with this, we say it's the 5 must-have security controls. If you're a smaller company, this list gets a little shorter, but it's going to start becoming, these are going to start becoming more and more required across the board.
Yeah.
So even though he has hardly anything on his computer, he still has to have a backup on that computer, right? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily, because
yeah,
one of the things we talked about was where what the insurance companies aren't saying here is you should have inventories, and not just inventories of your hardware and your software, but inventories of your data. If you have an inventory and you know where your data lives, then you back up appropriately. And as long as you're following those best practices, you're probably going to be fine. But I would say if there's a breach and the insurance company comes to you and says, well, you're asking me to pay for damages on data that wasn't backed up, and you told me you had backups, then the insurance company is going to go, yeah, we're not covering that because you told me you were backing it up, and you weren't backing it up because you didn't take an inventory.
Yeah, because he's saying
This
that
is
all
where we
his
get into problems.
Yeah, because he's saying that all his data lives in this cloud application that he has. That he has no data on his computer.
Run a scan on his machine and see what lives there.
yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of tools out there that'll do that kind of stuff.
I'd be curious. And then also, what is he talks about having all this stuff on a cloud, and what is the cloud software doing to regularly back up what he's using too? Or is he supposed to be doing that? I mean, there's so many layers to this. It's just, what's at risk here? And is he having to log in every time he goes onto that web portal too? I mean, or is it something that he's just permanently logged into when he uses his computer? You know what I mean? Like, is it asking him for MFA and those things? If someone were to get control of his computer, could they just get in?
Yeah, and probably so.
Yeah.
So let's move
Thank you.
on to EDR. As we start to talk about EDR, the big thing that we keep hearing here is 24/7 monitored. If there's anybody here who is monitoring your own EDR, those days are gone. It's time to outsource that to someone. Go explain to your customer that you're not big enough to manage a 24/7 SOC. It requires 8 people, even if you want to kill them all by overworking them. And it's a $500,000 a year expense minimum, probably closer to $1 million a year experience. So, or $1 million a year cost. So you have to outsource it. Get yourself an EDR that is absolutely 24/7, 365 monitored by some grownups, not just a couple guys in a basement somewhere. Patching and vulnerability management. I think everybody here kind of has a patch policy, or at least has a rough and tumble patch policy. Is everyone here doing some type of vulnerability management, scanning machines, detecting vulnerabilities? We're talking cyber CNS, IGI Nodeware, one of those types of products, right? Rolling it out. This is going to become an important one. And the point that we made at the boot camp was, not only do you need to be doing vulnerability management, but you should write an internal policy that says, this is how we patch, and when a vulnerability is found, this is how we respond, and what is our SLA, right? And this is something I didn't do at my MSP. We weren't there. The world was a different place then, but if I was in business today, and something I actually learned on the software side from our developers as we started building all of this, was high-level vulnerabilities get a 4-hour response time. Low-level vulnerabilities get a 2-day response time or a 1-week response time. And we need to have that policy in-house, and we need to operate on it, right? We need to use that as part of our governing principles on how the people who are responsible for these things are expected to respond. And this is even one more reason why you can't support every firewall any customer ever brings you, because you won't be able to keep up on the patches. You won't be able to keep up on the vulnerabilities. You won't be able to subscribe to all the alerts. You just won't be able to keep up with everything. So you need to be, insert firewall of religion here, a firewall shop, right? A Sophos shop or a Sonic Wall shop or whatever. And you need to standardize. It's becoming even more and more important. And then cybersecurity employee training. We just rolled our 3rd integration in the security awareness training space. If you guys didn't see it, we rolled out Fin last week or early this week. I don't even remember when it went out now. There's been so many cool new announcements. We've announced our Ninja One integration.
It was this, I think it was this week.
Yeah, Fin security integration rolled out this week. You were watching my LinkedIn? Yeah.
No, I just saw the puns. Integration made me laugh.
It made me laugh too. I'm going to use that for a long time. So yes, we've had the Fin integration. So Fin is part of the platform nowadays. So cybersecurity employee training is a big one. It is a mandate. It is a requirement. So
I mean, if you think about it, if the majority of breaches are due to human error, if they're not doing something to at least get more aware of what they can be doing to lower that risk, it's like, it's like sending a teenager. It's like sending 83%. It's like sending a teenager to a defensive driving school. It lowers the risk to the insurance company. They look at that as a tangible lower amount. So we're going to do it.
So 83% of breaches are human error. Microsoft says 99.9% of email compromise could be blocked by MFA. We know 2 things that fix the problem, right? Marnie was the math teacher. Statistically speaking, those are solutions. And that's kind of the conversation that we had. So if you guys scroll further down in the slides, you'll see where we spent some time mapping these to CIS controls. So if you take requirement 1 for MFA, we mapped it to some of the high level CIS controls that we see this aligning to. And then we kind of took a second slide to figure out the assumptions, the things that, well, yes, in order to require MFA for all of our applications, for all of our network access, and for all of our administrative access, well, first we have to have inventories, and we have to have automated inventory tools. Those are your Saslios and your augments, right? We have to have an allow list for software. Our customers have to be okay with us saying this is a disallowed software, et cetera. So go through those lists if you guys want to see them. There's some good content down there just on the things that are required, and starting to map these to an industry standard framework. We're going to see a big push from CompTIA later this year to adopt CIS in the CompTIA Trustmark framework. It's going to be based on the CompTIA Trustmark is going to be based on CIS. We are going to follow that lead and really start to rebuild a lot of our stuff with CIS in mind. So CIS is in there right now, but we're going to start to build some CIS plus, I guess, assessments later this year that'll give you guys more alignment to show IG1, right? Get the tags in there and get all of this working. So we're going to start to build some of that. We're going to start to get some of that in the system for you over the next couple of months, and really start to map and align and cross map some of this stuff so that it's easier for you guys to do what looks like the simple basic thing and still figure out how to check a box that has complicated long big words in it.
I think Brian has a
Yep.
question.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to share something on the cybersecurity training, which is kind of interesting. You know, I see younger generations needing less training, and then older generations almost feeling like, you know, they're being told they need to do it to protect the company. And so what I'm trying to do with our team is take an approach of, hey, we want you to do this to protect your personal life, right? Are you doing MFA on your online banking? What are you doing at home to protect all your stuff? Because if we can get our end users to start doing this level of security at home with their own personal life, they're going to start expecting it at the business. And if it's missing at the business, they're going to ask why they don't have it, right? So I'm wondering about the impact, right? How do we make a better impact with cybersecurity training? I'm thinking like bring it down home for the end user, right?
Well, there was a lot of conversation at the event about the phrase cyber resilience, and we've talked about that on this call before. I'm a huge fan of that phrase because it doesn't. It's hard to talk about cybersecurity because it sounds finite, and also say assume breach. We know we're going to get beat, all out of the same MSP's mouth while you're in a meeting with your client. And so cyber resilience is I think really great phrasing to have a conversation with your client about how resilient are we really to password stuffing attacks and all these other things that come through, and what are the things we can do about it, and how can we build a more resilient culture that allows us to stay out in front of it. But I love the concept of taking it to, hey, you should be thinking about doing this in your bank account at home, because if you don't have to do this annoying, obnoxious thing with your phone to get into your bank, you know, security and convenience are almost exact inverts. They're inversely related, right? Security and convenience just are
Another math
Well,
term.
can you throw your contact info in the chat?
Yeah.
I'm sure some folks here will want to chat with you. Guys, we gotta knock off here in about 3 minutes. If anybody's got another question or something they want to talk about, happy to take it. But also, if you think that diving deeper into this, if you think that there's other stuff that you want to see or hear, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can do some more with these guys. I love the folks over at Fifth Wall. They're doing good things. You know, they're doing great things. But my takeaway from all of this is that there are people out there who will be the insurance provider that's in your corner, as opposed to the outsider who's trying to argue with you over what the best practices are and who the real expert is where this is concerned. And there are providers out there who only do cyber insurance who understand that you're actually the expert in a lot of these things, and they really just need to figure out how to pacify the insurance company while they get your customer the best policy possible.
So is Fifth Wall a general cyber insurance company, or it's only to sell to MSP?
No, so we're a wholesaler that sells to end clients of MSPs. We partner with the MSPs to help them get cyber insurance liability for their clients.
So you guys are wholesale, like an insurance broker?
Think of us like a distributor. So we're like a step above brokers in the sense that a broker has access to maybe 4 or 5 companies directly. We have access to 42. So a lot of brokers, agents come to us for our access.
Okay.
Does that mean the MSP is acting as an agent?
No. So you know what? If you want to email me, we can talk about that. Probably is the best approach. We can talk about that, and I can walk you through our whole process. We have a conversation about it.
That should be a comic strip somewhere of how many layers there are in this insurance process, and nobody understands which one's which, because I know I've heard it several times and still don't know. But yes, they will work with you, but you're not the agent, you're not the one. And remember what I said, like, you shouldn't talk about it. You're not the expert. Don't pretend to be the expert. So
we'll give you the what can I say, what can I not say, and then anything you cannot say because you're not licensed. We'll just say we'll come in and do that for you.
There actually is a slide in here if you scroll down, if you guys want to check it out. But there is a what not to say slide. Yeah.
To clarify, Will, if I have a client that doesn't want to leave their insurance agency that they're with, I could point their agency to Fifth Wall to get a quote for them, right? Is
Yep.
that the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's something we can do too. There's other layers there because they're licensed. So we have to get broker agreements in place and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we do that too.
Right.
Joel, thank you so much for joining. I know it's 4 and we all have to roll.
I was sure this wasn't going to be a short conversation. It's a big topic, but thanks
It's
everybody.
only
for
1
hanging
o'clock,
out.
people. I got 3 hours
It's
to
only
go.
1 o'clock, people. Before we jump, I do want to introduce everyone to Casey, who's
Oh,
our customer success strategy consultant.
I've introduced him so many times, I forgot now. I guess everybody knew him now. Yes.
So if you see a Casey.Adams roll across your
Casey will be
email,
at Write a
it's
Boom
not
with me. So come find Casey and I,
Yeah.
because we'll be at the bar.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'll find the person that I want to talk to, and then I'll talk to Alex too.
We'll be at the bar. We'll be at the bar drinking on Will's credit card.
And my credit card is the company one. So
Nice.
woohoo.
All right. Hopefully we'll see a bunch of you at Write a Boom. And if you can't make Write a Boom, I mean it, take a serious look at MSP GeekCon. There'll be some good stuff there. I'm
And
presenting.
remember, we won't be meeting for the next 2 weeks, but I'll send you Monday emails to remind you.
There you go.
All right. Thanks
Have
all.
a good one, everybody.
all.
Really
Thanks for
appreciate it,
coming, Will.
everybody.
Thank you.
Yep. See ya.